Good morning, everybody. What's up? What's up? Say hi in the chat when you get here. It is another ACSS Live. We do this every single month. Our goal, it's really to fulfill our commitment to ongoing education and support. Obviously, a tool like Automatic.css is only as good as the person using it, right? It's like if you don't know what to do or how to use it, or you can't make use of it, it's not really valuable to you, right? So every single month we are here on a live stream to answer your questions, to demo some stuff, to give you whatever support you need for implementing this tool. Because we, those of us who do use Automatic CSS all the time and who have had it as part of their workflow, we know how invaluable it is. We know, how it transforms the workflow, how it slashes build time, all of the great things that it does, and just gets rid of a bunch of headaches and decisions that we have to make, right? So we want everybody to experience that. But if you don't know what you're doing, or you don't know how to use the tool, you're not gonna experience those things. So we gotta get you the help that you need. Say hi when you arrive. We got Randall in the house, SK, Jeff, Steve, Manny. Andy is here, Donatus, Payaso, hello from Texas. Welcome, welcome, welcome. You Muck 85, hi from Germany. Okay, got a lot of people in the house today. Pretty good viewership. Ruben, welcome, welcome, welcome. Let me go back up here. Let's got to get some love to the early people. Jacob, John, Justin, Klaus, Robbie, WP Espresso. Good. Okay. All right, guys. Here's how this is going to go. I do like to, pick 2 or 3 little things just to kind of get us going, right? Things that ACSS does that a lot of users might not be necessarily aware of, or some of the things that are a little bit maybe more complicated or that aren't immediately obvious, things that maybe people didn't turn on, Like there's some stuff that's off by default and a beginner user is just trying to figure out the basics. They haven't even explored these options, but they're extremely helpful. So we are going to be looking at 3 different settings or features or whatever you want to call them. And then we're going to move right into Q&A. And the way Q&A works is you put a capital Q or the word question in all caps, or hashtag Q, like however you want to do it to denote that this is a question that you want answered on the stream. And that helps me sort those things from general chat banter and things like that. So any of those things to denote a question, then go ahead and ask your question. This is an Automatic CSS live stream. It is not technically a Frames live stream. If you have Frames heavy questions, there is a Frames live stream, okay? So I would probably say save that for the Frames live stream and keep this one focused on ACSS. Because remember, not every ACSS user is a Frames user, okay? As much as we would like them to be, as much as they should be, it's not 100%. It's very high. It's a very high percentage, but it's not 100%. So we want to keep this on topic and on task. We got Mateo in the house. So if any technical stuff gets asked, behind the scenes stuff, that can be answered by Mateo. Okay, I will come back and check questions in just a minute. Let's go ahead and start screen sharing. How are we doing on? Okay, yeah, we were zoomed in a little. Look at that. We don't want to be in that mode, do we? Okay, I don't even know if you guys can see that. But you should see the screen just fine. Let's get Facebook out of here. Let's get this out of here. Okay. First thing we're going to look at, let me refresh our builder. So we've got quick column and list manipulation. Now, I saw this as a discussion in the ACSS community just the other day, which spawned me to be like, hey, next ACSS Live, might want to hit on that a little bit, right? Somebody was asking, they saw on one of my sites how I had a 2-column little list situation going on. And they were like, how do I do that? And actually somebody responded with the custom CSS approach, but you don't need the custom CSS approach because you have Automatic CSS. And so the question is like, hey, if you had to, would you know off the top of your head how to break this list into multiple columns And would you know how to color the markers? These are called markers right here. Would you know how to color those markers? And of course, you don't want to write the custom CSS even if you know how to do it, but there's a lot of users who just don't even know how to do it in the first place. So I've got this list inside of a rich text element right here. And there's a couple different ways you can approach this actually with ACSS. There's call count, okay? This is like a column count. And this is not using CSS grid, okay? And this is why I don't like when page builders or other frameworks use terms that are naturally confusing. A lot of page builders have like a columns element that actually uses CSS grid or Flexbox. Either one doesn't really matter. I hate that it's called columns because there's actually something in CSS called CSS columns, and they behave completely differently from Flex and from grid. And so calling something columns when they don't use CSS columns is very, very, very confusing. And it's, as you're learning, you're trying to learn, like it's more confusing to you as a beginner. It's confusing to me as an advanced dev because that term has its own meaning that you're not using. So that's confusing in its own. But if you're learning, it's even more confusing, right? So in ACSS, you can rest easy knowing that when we call something columns, it actually is columns. And of course, we have live preview, right? So you can see what these are going to do. So this is going to break it into 2 columns, 3 columns, 4 columns. And the great thing about CSS columns is, unlike Flexbox, unlike CSS grid, CSS columns, the superpower of CSS columns is that it can flow data from one column to the next automatically, where Flex cannot do that and grid cannot do that. So this is a great thing to use. So call count 2. Now, there's another utility you can use. I'll show you another superpower in just a second. You can use call with M, okay? And you're gonna see there's a little bit of a difference here. There's L, M, S. Now, if I do call with M, you're gonna see that it actually breaks it into 3 columns because this is controlling a column width only, and it's gonna fit as many columns as it can at the width that you've given it. So if I remove this utility right here, and I do call with S, right? It's gonna fit more of them because it's a smaller column. And if I do call with L, it's only gonna fit 2 of them. Now, you don't want them so spaced apart like this, right? So at that point, you would come in and you would control the width of the container. Like, let's say I did 600 pixels. Okay, that doesn't give me enough room. 700, 800, 900, 1,000. No, that's not doing it. Okay. Don't know why that's not doing that. But there, you would shrink the column. That would bring the 2 columns much closer together. Now, the difference is this should be automatically responsive, whereas the column count that you're choosing, not automatically responsive. You're gonna have to choose a different column count at every breakpoint. Or you can combine the 2 utilities together. This is your third option to make it automatically responsive. So you can say, no, I want call count 2, right? But I also wanna say call with M, right? And this should make it 2, but automatically responsive as well. And then you just manipulate the width of the container, which I'll double check in a minute and see why that's not behaving. It could be because this is a, no, it should be fine. Let's try the width of this container, the parent container. 600 pixels, well, that's gonna cause more problems because the auto centering of the container. Okay, we'll work that out in a little bit. All right, so that is column manipulation using CSS columns on the rich text element. The other thing for the marker color that we talked about. So we have these marker classes, and if you just watch them, if you live preview, see that? You can just easily change like to any of the colors in the ACSS system. Say, hey, I want action markers. Okay, now you got action markers. So you see that blue color is my action color for the website. Any color, any shade. The only thing I don't think that's there is transparencies, but that's hardly ever needed. So just marker is the name. Marker, and then you have all, I mean, look at all the options available. Now, if you turn off certain colors, obviously those options won't be available to you, but every shade, every color is there for changing your markers. You can do that on the fly, super, super, super easy. Okay, let's do the next one. Contextual spacing and auto contextual spacing. I think this is one of those things that's turned off by default. So like a beginner user wouldn't, they just Maybe they haven't gotten there yet to turn it on, but it's super, super, super helpful. So you definitely want it. So this says, how is this stuff automatically spaced out? Like, for example, my heading and my text. I have set nothing. There's no utilities here. There's no ID styling. There's no nothing. It's just automatic. If I click on this grid, it's got a grid 3 class. That doesn't set a gap of any kind. There's no gap set here. There's no gap utility. This is just has an automatic grid gap. The other thing too is I see a lot of confusion in, or let's say a mistake. It would be a mistake, right? If I was going to space this out, coming down here to use gap, you want to use gap. That's correct, okay? But the idea that you would do something like space M, right? Or space L or XL or whatever, this is not the play, right? That you want to avoid doing that because we have what are called contextual utilities that actually define spacing for specific situations. Those are the utilities that you actually want to use. And those are container gap, content gap, and grid gap. Okay, we're going to go over all three of those things. Container gap is the space between containers in a section. So if I collapse this section right here, you see it has 2 containers in it. You guys should know by now that a container is the content width of your website. It's auto-centered in the section, okay? I have a whole article on section structure, and I have a video on section structure if you go watch those. But you have the containers, right? Well, we need space between containers in a section. That spacing is typically bigger than your normal content spacing, just by the natural rhythm of spacing on a website, okay? So we have something for that called container gap. That's the spacing between these containers. Now, inside of a container where we have heading and text, that's where you would see content gap. That is the gap between actual content on the website. And so that utility is called content gap. So the container gap is called container gap. The content gap is called content gap. And then the third major contextual area where you will find spacing constantly is grid spacing. So the spacing between items in a grid. And this is called grid gap. Okay, so we have container gap, content gap, and grid gap. Now you can actually set the values of these in the dashboard. So if you go to spacing and you come down here to contextual spacing, you'll see the container gap right here. You'll see the content gap right here, and you'll see the grid gap right here. These toggles, though, are off by default, I believe. Pretty sure. I'm going to go ahead and hit save here. So we're going to update our style sheets, and we're going to go back and look at what just happened. Look how squished everything is. All of the spacing just disappeared, right? And this is actually how Bricks is natively. Natively, when you build in Bricks, if you add things to a section, they're going to all be touching each other. There's going to be no spacing there. And so what you have to do is put a utility in there, like maybe a container gap utility class or a content gap utility class. There are classes for these things. A grid gap utility class inside of your grids. But that's very repetitive, and it's just over constantly having to add these utilities. Okay, I added a couple things, now I need a gap. I added more things, I need a gap, and I need a gap here, and I need a gap there. And it's like you're just constantly, like your part-time job is adding utilities. Or you can come over here in ACSS and be like, yeah, I would like you to automatically space my containers and sections. I would like you to automatically space my content in those containers. Now we got to talk about a limit, like a designed limitation of that in just a second. And then on my grids, I would love for you to just naturally just put the gap in the grids. And we're going to go ahead and hit save here. That updates the sheets, and I refresh, and look, everything is spaced out automatically as I wanted it to be. And I have full control over the values of these things, right? So I can change and adjust at any time. You can make large adjustments, like go from space L to space M in your grid gap, for example. Or you can make minor adjustments, right? What if it was already space M and you're like, I just wanted a little smidge. I just wanted a smidge bigger. You can feel free to put a calc in here, right? So you can say space M times 1.1 would make space M 10% bigger. Okay, so you can pretty much do whatever you want. And the power of these contextual, let me show you the power of your contextual utilities here, right? Let's put this back on space M. By the way, I've been working a little bit in the 3.0 dashboard. I have a lot, my brain now has we could call it disgust. It's just like there's a little disgust going on here with this dashboard situation. Not that it's a bad dashboard. It's just once you've used 3.0, I mean, we've gone to a different tier, right? We don't want to go back to this. That's what I'm dealing with a little bit right now. 3.0 it's great, and it's going to be here very soon. So be excited about that. Okay. So this actually, the power of these utilities, okay, listen, gives you global control. Like, let's say you wanted to tighten all of your content spacing across an entire website. It could be 1,000 pages. You can do that from right here. What if you wanted to tighten up all your grids or add more white space to every grid across your website? You can do that from one area right here. And you're free. See, where space XL or space M or space L, there's no context to where you have used those utilities. These abstracted utilities called container gap and content gap and grid gap add that context so that you can safely make adjustments globally to different areas of spacing. You see the value in that? So this is just something you absolutely should be using, and use it in all situations where it makes sense, okay? Like, for example, in a card. And I think this is very important to talk about because, again, I still see people doing this the wrong way. And of course, to say it's wrong, it's like, is it really wrong? I mean, you're using variables, you're using utilities. I mean, you're already doing better than what most people do. But if you really want to go to the next level, you got to know which utilities to use in which circumstances. So let's say that this was a card, right? I'm not going to do all the like BIM and all of that stuff. I'm just proving a point here, okay? So we're going to add text, bang. Oh, also notice, why aren't these automatically spaced? Good question. We didn't want to get too heavy-handed with this. It's not like, hey, go space out every single div or block or whatever that you add to a page. It feels a little too heavy-handed. We might go that route, but it's hard to go there and then take it back, right? So we just kind of are inching forwards with the automatic spacing kind of solution. So, it's going to be more conversations that we have with you guys about like how far do you want us to take this? Right now, we don't go into every div and every block and add automatic spacing there. But we actually, now that where exists and is fairly well supported, we can do that without any negative ramifications, I believe. I still need to test a few things, but I think we are going to be able to reach into all of these areas and just automatic content gap them because it's going to be very easy to override. Okay, so what was I getting at? All right, we've got our heading, we've got our text. What was I about to show you? The variable name. Okay, row gap. Space M would be the wrong thing to use right here. Okay, why? Because this is a card, and inside of your card, you have content, okay? Now, that tells you I need to use content gap. However, in a card, I get it, in a card, maybe you don't want that much content gap. Like maybe content gap in normal, everyday use at other places is fine, but it's too much for a card. So should we just switch to using something else? No, because this is still related to the spacing of your content. So we want to keep it that way. So we do something like content gap divided by 1.25. Like you make an adjustment off of the content gap utility, and it keeps you linked in with your content gap. So if my general content gap ever changes, this still updates as well, and it's always relative to the main content gap property. And you could do literally whatever you want here. I want half of the normal content gap. Okay, just divide it by 2. Okay, so you're just making these minor adjustments off of the main utility. That's very important. So you keep the context intact, but you can still make adjustments. That's why there's no limitations to any of this, okay? John says, don't tease 3.0 without showing it. I got to. It's just, man, it's hard. It's hard to not talk about it. It's so exciting. Okay, so you guys see that. You want to use, and if you're doing sections, spacing out your containers, don't go space XL here or anything. Use the container gap. If you want less container gap in that situation, just calc it. It's fine. But you keep the context intact. That retains the ability to control all of this globally, okay? You don't want to lose the ability to control all of this globally. So these contextual utilities right here our money, also far less decision making. I need content gap. Okay, there's my content gap. Oh, I need a little less. Okay, calc it. It's fine. But you're not like, oh, do I use M? Do I use L? Do I use XL? Do I use S? Do I use XS? What did I use before? No, it's just content gap, or grid gap, grid gap, grid gap. So a lot less decision making in that regard, because the vast majority of the time, 9 out of 10 times, the actual utility is going to give you exactly what you want. You don't even have to calc it. The other thing too is you can get to those utilities from the contextual panel, okay? So if you wanted to, let's go to gap here, all right? So right click right there, there's your content gap, container gap, and grid gap right there for you, okay? So those are super quick to add. If you can't remember the names, I mean, there's only 3 of them, and that they're called like grid gap is grid gap. Like it's very easy to remember in that regard. Okay, I think we made the point on that one. Smart spacing. This one, I get a lot of questions on this. They're like, I don't know what it does. I don't know where it does it. I don't know what's going on. So what you're looking at right here is like, think of this as maybe blog post text. It's a rich text element, but this is effectively kind of the same situation you'll be in with your blog post templates. Bricks, Oxygen, all these builders, they don't give you the controls that you need on a rich text element or a blog post, okay? So see this spacing right here? It looks pretty nice. Like the spacing is all pretty great. A lot of times you want more spacing above your headings, right? Than everywhere else, than between your paragraphs and so on. And then your lists, you might want to do different spacing things with them. Well, let's look at this rich text element. When you go to style, do you see anything here to control the spacing of the headings that are in this rich text element? No. Do you see anything here that gives you control over the spacing of these list items or the lists themselves, the list wrapper? No. Do you see anything here that gives you control over the spacing between your paragraphs? No. No, you have no controls here. There's no, so the only option, if you're not using ACSS, is to come down here and write a bunch of CSS. So, you got to target the paragraphs, and you can't just target the paragraphs and the headings. You got to not target, orphans or last children or first children, for example. There's a lot of like logic involved in how you're actually going about, and nobody wants to mess with that stuff. It's one, it's not fun, and 2, it just takes up time that shouldn't need to be taken up. So what does this look like? If I go to typography and I scroll down, typography spacing, and there's this setting right here called smart spacing, okay? And it says it resets the user agent typography spacing and applies smart gap spacing to typography. It's a lot of mumbo jumbo that's hard to explain, basically. But I turn this off and I hit save changes, and then we're gonna go back to the front end and we're gonna look, and this is basically kind of out of the box with bricks. Like the list is okay, that's all fine and dandy, but like, why is this all mushed together? And then if I want to change the spacing of my paragraphs, there's no control for that. I can't control it at all, right? So that's where this smart spacing comes in. The other thing is, if I come back up here, when these things are paragraphs, right? Let me go hit save here. What you'll often find, and usually it's if it's even worse with like an accent heading when you put it ahead of stuff. I think I have it turned off in this Bricks install by default, but Bricks will apply default paragraph spacing. And you don't want that, because when you add your gap in, now you have uneven spacing. And it's like, why is that happening? I got to turn off. I don't want the paragraph spacing. I didn't ask for that. I didn't ask for a margin between in a single paragraph element. So it's a big problem, right? Smart spacing fixes all of this stuff. So I'm going to turn on smart spacing, save, and then we're going to go see our little rich text element here. So now all of our spacing is back to being nice and rhythmic. Now let me show you each setting individually. So we have something called heading spacing. I'm going to exaggerate this just so you can see the obvious nature of it, okay? So we'll do something like 6M, and then we're going to go back to the front end and look what it does to all of my headings. Now, it's not going to do this to the first heading. Okay, so it's going to ignore the first heading because nobody wants any spacing above that heading in general. So it's going to ignore that one. And it's going to ignore headings in other certain situations as well. That's why it's called smart spacing, because it's being smart about what it's doing. It's not just like, being dumb about where it's putting spacing. Okay, so that's heading spacing. That's what that does. I'm going to reset that. And then we're going to do paragraph spacing. And again, I'm just going to exaggerate this here. So where the builder gives you no control over this stuff, you have the control with Automatic CSS out of the box. So there's paragraph spacing. All right, we're gonna reset that back to its default. Now we're gonna have list spacing. What does that do? So we'll hit save changes here and we'll refresh. It's taking the list wrapper and putting the spacing above the whole list wrapper so that you can manage how far away these lists are from other content. All right, and then let's reset that back to default, and then let's check this list item spacing. We'll do a 5M on that. And then we will refresh and look at now what's happening with the list items. Notice it's between the list items. It's not on the top or the bottom of the list items, okay? But you have full control over maneuvering that stuff around. And so with all these controls right here, you can really dial in how your rich text behaves, how your blog posts behave, even though the builder gives you no control over these things and the CSS is legitimately difficult to write, you can do all of this just from the ACSS dashboard. Okay, those are the 3 things I just wanted to highlight real quick before we dive into actual Q&A. I am going to leave that page. Let's go back out here and let's go create a new page. We'll call this Sandbox. This will be for our answering questions. We'll just have a nice blank page to start from. Okay, it is time for Q&A. Let's go, any question asked previous to now. I'm not gonna go back up and find them because then I get all lost in the chat. They need to start coming in now. So if you asked one earlier, you gotta repost it right now. And we're gonna go, well, first we're gonna say hi to Diane, who just came in. Welcome, 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 Diane. How we doing on stream numbers? Oh, we got real good numbers here. Where to use var space im? I mean, you could use space im wherever you want medium spacing, but if it's in an area where where it's like content, then I would use content gap. Because like I said, that keeps that contextually locked in to that relative to that section. Do you apply? Okay, that's a question to Andrea. All right. Question, Kevin commented about how CSS should not be added in a separate style sheet. In Bricks, where would I enter CSS for a section A selector that does not match up to one module, a code module? Good question, Travis. The first thing I would ask you is, well, this actually puts us in 2 different areas, okay? I tend to think, you wanna know what I think a builder should do? Maybe Thomas is here, maybe he's not here. He's probably not here. Wish he was, okay? You know how you can style the ID? And we also know you can obviously add a class and you can style the class. I want the ability to just add a style the selector. Like it should show me as an option here, the actual selector of this element, like section, for example. And so I should be able to add styles to section, just in the builder. Like why do I have to go to a style sheet to do that? We can already do it with the ID. We can already do it with the class. Why can't we just do it with the other selector? Like the normal HTML selector. Like list item. Why can't I just select list item somewhere and just add styles to it with the builder? Why do I have to go to a style sheet? Don't you think that should be a thing, right? Do we need to feature request this? So that's number 1. Because that doesn't exist, yes, you're gonna have to write that somewhere. So you have a few different options. You can go to something like WP Codebox. This is where you're gonna have to go. You just have to. You're forced to go to an external style sheet. So WP Codebox or Appearance Theme File Editor. Here's a Bricks child theme right here. If you're not using the Bricks child theme, now in Oxygen land, because I gotta remember, not everybody's using Bricks. If you're in Oxygen, Oxygen has no child theme, has no theme at all. So you have to use something like WP Codebox, right? Or there's a bunch of different ways to load your own external style sheet. Or, I mean, God forbid, you're gonna probably hate your life if you do this, but you can go to the customizer here and you could add some CSS here. Wouldn't recommend that, but I see a lot of people do that. It's a possibility. Yeah, so let me set that list spacing back. Let's go back. Let's go to typography down, and yeah, we don't want 5M between our list items. Okay, let's save there. So yeah, you're forced to. You're forced to. But I think they should allow us to style global selectors. Okay, let's go to the next question. I'm gonna try to roll through these as quickly as possible so we can get as many as we can. How to use the selection alt class properly? Does it have to be used in conjunction with some other color setting, or haven't gotten it to work no matter what I try? Okay, I mean, good question. We can see that in work. This is one I don't normally use often. Let's go to website Ipsum. This was like one of those cute little, it was more in like the chintzy, kind of cutesy realm of features. See how when I select text, that is it's not the normal selection color, right? It's like a branded selection color. It's like, hey, that's my action color of my website, and the text color is action dark, and maybe I want that to actually be white and whatever. So if I go to additional styling, I believe it's under here. Yeah, selection styling right here. You can see that it's set to action and action dark. And so if I change this to like action ultra light and I hit save, and we go to the front end and we refresh, okay? See how the text is now ultra light instead of dark when I select text? Okay, so that's that. Now you said selection, and you said what? Selection alt. See, I don't even use this utility. Selection alt. Okay. Let's just see if that does anything. That one did not. Selection, alt. Okay, and then the alt is set, so it should be doing that. And then I don't even know, did we put in docs for this? That's another question. If something's not working, I do have Andrea in the chat, and he will quickly put in a ticket. I don't know if I've done selection docs yet, because I'm prioritizing important docs, and that's just not a super important one. Because again, it's like, you don't have to do, like, this is not a requirement. This is not anything super important. It's just kind of like oh, that's cute. That's cute that it uses the website's, brand colors to do text selection, more or less. Let me see if it's in the cheat sheet. It is. It is in the cheat sheet. Okay. Well, let's inspect it. Let's see what's actually going on with that. We can take a look. We can take a look-see. I don't even know if they have... Yeah, the inspector doesn't even have it, I don't think, by default to look at it. Okay, Andrea, mark that one down. I'm gonna look at that one. The alt version of the selection utility. It's kind of a mouthful. All right, we'll take a look at that closer. But if you're using the normal one, then that's controllable from right here. And then the alt one should pick up on that one. All right, can you explain how desktop scale and mobile scale work? I normally just leave it on default, but I have no idea how and when to use it. Same for base spacing. Okay, so this is from SK. Explain how desktop scale and mobile scale work. Yes, so this is both for typography and for spacing, by the way. So you'll notice you set base sizes for things, and then you have this setting called desktop scale, and you have a setting called mobile scale. So desktop scale is on desktop, obviously. The degree of change, it's always hard for me to explain. The degree of change between sizes, right? So the bigger this number gets, the bigger the change is gonna be between sizes. Like how much bigger is L versus M or XL versus L? And so the bigger the number gets, the bigger the variance of change is gonna be. And the smaller, the tighter everything is gonna be in terms of how their sizes change. The L's will always be bigger than the M's, and the XL's will always be bigger than the L's, but how much bigger are they? Bigger numbers equals bigger variance, smaller numbers equals smaller variance. And so you can really dial that in. And the whole goal of the math scale is consistency, right? It's also decision-making. Like it's annoying when you start a new project to decide, okay, my H1's gonna be this, and then my H2 is gonna be this, and then my H3, I guess, is gonna be this. And by the way, I gotta make clamp functions for all these things. or I have to manage all their sizes at breakpoints, and then my H4 is gonna be this, and my H5 is gonna be, and then if you make a change, so like maybe like, nah, my H2 needs to be bigger. Oh, but then my H1 needs to be bigger because I made the H2 bigger. Okay, I gotta go check. See all this like dancing? Nobody wants to do that. Nobody wants to do that. So it's way better for you to just be like, all right, my base heading size, which is H4, that's gonna be 20 pixels on desktop, and it's gonna be 16 pixels on mobile, and it's gonna fluidly scale between those two numbers. And then my H3 is gonna be, based on what I choose here, let's say 1.25 bigger than my H4. And then my H2 is gonna be 1.25 bigger than my H3. And so it naturally, rhythmically scales up and down, okay? And if you ever wanna change the scale, you can change the scale. They all adjust automatically. They're all still fluidly responsive. You don't have to make any other decisions or changes. Now, what about the mobile scale? So this gives you added flexibility, right? Let's say you wanted to go crazy. Like the golden ratio, 1.68. That's actually extreme variance between the sizes, okay? Which may work great on desktop, but on mobile, probably a shit show, right? So you're like, all right, I want golden ratio on like my laptops, my desktops kind of situation. But when it gets down to phones, no, we gotta go much more conservative with our spacing. And so this is what that allows you to do. You can keep everything very tight on mobile while it has wide variance on desktop. So that's what the mobile scale allows you to do, is changing the behavior on those smaller devices versus the bigger devices. That allows you to do something like this right here. And by the way, they can both be equal. If you want them to both be 2.5, that's fine too. Like that's perfectly fine. If you did want extreme variance on mobile for whatever reason, just set them to both the golden ratio and you're good to go. So it just gives you a lot of added flexibility and control. And then this is for headings. You have the same with your normal text sizes down here. You also have the same situation going on with your spacing. And that's what, these are just levers to allow you to just dial everything in. You never have to look at a single clamp function ever again in your life. You never have to make any min-max decisions on every single level, okay? None of that, none of that. Everything is automatic. Everything is handled for you right here. And then if you have to override something, you're like, well, everything is great except my H1. I just want my H1 to be a lot bigger because I want to go bold with it. I want to be wild with it. Okay, you can do that, right? You come down to the overrides for heading sizes. Anything you put in here, it's just going to take it out of the scale situation and it's going to give you exactly what you asked for right here. So you could say, I want my headings to be 120 pixels on desktop, but I want them to scale down to 32 on mobile. You hit save, and it just does it for you. It takes the H1 out of the math scale, and it just does 120 and 32 and fluidly scales between those two values, and you're good to go. And if you want to do that with every single size, you're like, Kevin, I don't want to use math scales. Get these math scales out of my life. I want to control all my own headings. Okay, no problem. You just come down here, you can do whatever you want, right? You also don't even need a min. It'll go to the normal min by default, but you can put a min if you want to. The only thing you should not do here, which I've seen like one or two people do, it doesn't make any sense to my brain. I don't know why you'd want to do this, and it causes problems. Don't make the min, I mean, this should be obvious, bigger than the max. Like, that's clearly gonna cause problems. So don't do that. But you can do anything you want with these manual size overrides here. You have heading size overrides, you have text size overrides right here. So you can do this with all the text sizes as well. So again, you have, even though Automatic CSS does a lot for you out of the box, it's never forcing you into that paradigm, right? You can just override it. It's fine. You can do whatever you want. Does that answer your question, SK? All right, Travis says, Kevin commented about how CSS, okay, we already did that question. Can we have a text underline offset setting in ACSS? I'm not sure it is in right now. It is, well, text underline offset, no, but link underline offset, yes. So if you set the text decoration to underline, for example, you're going to get the offset option. So you just throw an offset value in there and that's gonna offset your underline on your links. Now, why don't we have a text underline offset? Because one, text underline is very rare. Two, text underline is, I would say, discouraged. Because when you underline text on the internet, it makes people think it's a link. And you don't want people to think something's a link if it's not actually a link. That's bad UX. So I tend to say avoid text underlines in general. And that's why we don't offer like a utility to make it easy. We don't want to make it easy for you to like kind of do the wrong thing, right? So just avoid text underlines. But if you want link underlines and an offset for those, we do have that. But good question. Okay, for Gutenberg buttons, is there a way to have them pull the styling for the bricks button without custom CSS? I'm trying to figure out what you're asking, really. For the bricks button, all button styling comes from Automatic CSS. So when you're in bricks and you add a button like this, so you throw a class on there called button action, okay? That's done. Now, if you're gonna add a button in Gutenberg, you just do the exact same thing. So actually there's no styling coming from bricks for the buttons other than what's there by default, which nobody wants, right? And I would discourage you from trying to add default styling to these buttons because it could cause complications with other utilities for buttons. Like if you styled it here and then tried to change it to like button primary or something, or button accent, or button black, or button white, or whatever, it may not, those two things may collide. You want to try to use ACSS for everything. So that gives me the ability to come in here and say button action, or like, let's do button black as an example. Button black. And then if I wanted to do button S, like I wanted to go with a small button, that's a possibility. I wanted to go with a big button, right? That's a possibility as well. I wanted to change it, like I want the outline version of my button. I can do that. And so this is all very easy to do with little utility classes. And the reason utility classes is okay for this is because you legitimately do need one-off button styles in different areas. If I have a background color, like a super dark background color, or how about this right here? Let's say I wanted to use my action color as a background color. Let me take that one away. So there's my action color. What's gonna happen if I add a button that is my action color? I mean, that's not great, right? And if you have default button styling, that's pretty much what you're gonna see right there. So in that situation, I would absolutely wanna do something like a button black or a button white or something that has very clear contrast from this action colored background, right? So this is a one-off instance of you just flying through a page, making decisions on what color a button should be. Now you wanna be careful with this because if you have 8 different color buttons on a website, nobody really knows what the action color is anymore. So you don't want to get into that situation, but black buttons here and there, white buttons here and there, and then everything else is action buttons. That's, I mean, very standard in web design. So just use those utilities, you should be good to go. I know there is in Gutenberg a little bit of a problem with that utility. It's already fixed. It's waiting on the 2.8 release, but I'll just describe why that exists. And once again, it's just Gutenberg being Gutenberg. So here's buttons. So in Gutenberg, they couldn't just give you a button element. Like that would have been too straightforward, too sensical, too practical, right? They had to give you a buttons element. And so you add the buttons element. And if you look in the list view, which never stays open on its own, it's because it's designed to, like, I guess, house multiple buttons or something. And so now you have this situation where it's like, where do I put the class? Like, do I put it on this wrapper? Do I put it on the individual button? It turns out the individual button also has a wrapper in itself that nobody needs. Nobody asked for that, but they give it to you. Why? Because they like to make your life difficult. So this is my call to action. And let's try to put it on here and see what happens. Now, I think I might be in, I don't know what branch I'm in. I'm on a dev site and I've got 8,000 ACSS branches and I don't know which one is selected right now. So we'll see what we get. But I do button action and we will publish. Okay, and let's go to, probably also need to turn like Gutenberg styling on. So we're gonna go in here because Gutenberg is not a normal environment. So you need to tell it that we're gonna do some special stuff to you. So we got to turn on. Okay, that's all on. We're good to go there. All right, let's check on the front end. Where's that page? Here we go. Okay, So it looks like this is the fixed version. What you would see in the non-fixed version is a second layer of this action color because it doesn't know, the old version didn't realize, oh, there's an extra wrapper there that nobody asked for, so both of them get the button styling. That's not good. But we fixed that in 2.8, so it actually does appear like a button. But that's literally all you have to do. Just make sure you put the class on the actual button itself and not on this wrapper up here. That will definitely cause some problems. So let's do button action there, and let's go back here. That's what you're gonna get if you put it on that wrapper. And that's actually what you'll probably get in 2.7 or previous because of the other, button wrapper situation. Okay, that's that. It's pretty straightforward. All right, let's update. Let's get out of Gutenberg. Try to spend as little time in Gutenberg as we possibly can. Okay, let's go back to questions here. Is typography spacing active in Gutenberg blocks? Okay, so this is about the smart spacing thing. Remember when I said we're not too heavy-handed with it. So we don't go into every div, every block, every this and try to do the smart spacing thing for you, or the automatic spacing even. The same situation with both of them. So in that situation, there's a smart spacing utility. So any container where you actually want smart spacing, where it's not actually applied, you just do smart spacing like that, and boom, it'll apply smart spacing for that particular container for you. So give that a shot and let me know. And that should be the same in Gutenberg, right? But remember, most of the time when you're building a page, like a card or something like that, you don't want smart spacing. You actually want just even spacing. You want gaps. So that's where you use content gap or whatever. That would be the most sensible utility to use is content gap like we talked about earlier. You would not want to go with smart spacing in that situation. Smart spacing is designed for like paragraphs of text and like just think rich text elements with headings and lists and paragraphs. Think blog posts, okay, long form content. That's what smart spacing is for. In terms of the spacing it applies, and then what it does as a secondary thing is it takes away default paragraph spacing where you actually don't want it, because in those situations you want even spacing using something like gap. So it's kind of doing two things at once. Okay, let's move on. Trying to roll through these fast so everybody gets accounted for. What is the best way to avoid horizontal scrolling that appears after breakout full? Use overflow hidden for sections. Okay. So basically what he's saying here is you pop an image in here. Let's do I have a wide one? Are these all tall? Okay, there we go. There's a wide one. All right, so there's that, right? And you'll get into a situation where, let me kind of show everybody what this is, why you're doing this in the first place. Okay, let's move this container up and let's drop a heading in here. Let's drop some text in here. Okay, let's save. Let's go view that on the front end. Okay, so this is kind of, this is very boring, right? And you're like, I really want this image to go like edge to edge, okay? So you can come in here to that image right there, search for something like breakout, and you get various degrees of how that is going to break out of its parent container. Like XL will just do a little bit, full will go all the way to the edges. So I'm gonna grab full. And then now, oh, that's much nicer. Then you could even come in with like an aspect ratio utility, right? And make it 16:9 or whatever. And what this is doing is it's kind of doing something that's not normally possible, like an image just overflowing its normal parent container. But what you'll find is that on certain, notice on my browser, there is no horizontal scroll. There is vertical scroll. That's normally when you see the horizontal scroll bar. This is a browser interpretation issue. It's a well-known issue across CSS. I'll try to explain it because it's dumb. It's the browser misinterpreting what is going on. So because this image is 100% of the viewport, and there's a vertical scroll bar. See that vertical scroll bar over there? What some browsers say or interpret this as is, oh gosh, there's a little bit, there's like 5 pixels of hidden content behind that vertical scroll bar. And so what we need to do, remember, this is dumb. What we need to do is add a horizontal scroll bar so they can go like this and see that little 5 pixels of information. Now, Chrome, on Mac anyway, is smart enough to be like, that's dumb. We're not going to do that. We're not going to add that horizontal scroll bar. There's no reason to. But some browsers do try to add the horizontal scroll bar, and people find it very annoying. And you're right, it is very annoying. But it's a misinterpretation of what needs to happen by the browser. Yes, you can use overflow hidden. However, there's limitations to overflow hidden. If you're working in a section that has sticky elements, that will turn off your sticky elements. That's annoying. So yeah, you can, it's not like a, be all end all fix in every situation. So you just got to be a little bit careful with what you're doing, or I guess know what you're doing. But yeah, that's one way to get rid of the horizontal scroll bar. If you see it, like in my browsers, I don't ever see it, but I guess some people do. So yes, I guess overflow hidden is the best way to do it. Now, I believe the next CSS spec with dynamic viewport width, DVW units, which aren't fully supported yet, so we can't switch to them, that will solve that issue, as far as I know. But again, we can't use those because they don't have enough browser support. Just the life of CSS. Okay. When will the ACSS cheat sheet be ready? After 3.0. How to target text transform for header, footer, nav versus links in the content section. How to target text transform for header, footer, nav versus links. I need a little, can you reword this? And I'll try to decipher on your reworded version. I'm not quite sure what you're asking. Question, breakpoint still need to put +1 pixel to the breakpoint value? No, that's been fixed. That was from the Oxygen days because Oxygen handles breakpoint values incorrectly, and we built for that initially, and then Bricks does it correctly. Every other quickly does it correctly. So we just decided, we're not going to do that anymore, and we switched to not have the 1 pixel offset. So no, now it's just literal match 1-to-1 ACSS and Bricks. If you're an Oxygen, you still have to use the offset, but nobody else does. Locations grid alpha, when this was created, you used MB. Oh, like Metabox? Is that okay? Yeah, I'm using ACF, but it pulls in data markers for MB. Where to change it? You just change that in the loop or the dynamic data. Locations grid alpha. Anything that's an alpha, man, was like a long time ago. It's gonna be interesting. I don't even know what frame that is. Location alpha. Oh yeah, because this one's a complex. This is a complex situation here. We got to turn on this code block. Okay, so you're gonna have a query looped list in a vertical slider right here, and then you're gonna have query looped map markers over here. But no, that's post title. Let me go here. Query loop. You just need a location CPT. It shouldn't matter whether that's ACF or Metabox. Like you're just going to choose it from right here. See, that's what the thing looks like when it's actually populated. I don't know what Metabox stuff you're referring to. Because you just tell it what your CPTs are called, and then it's going to do it. Like you need a location CPT, and then you need all the typical custom fields. And we have whole documentation on this. I have a whole video on how this was built. It's just important to go through that. And if you're still having trouble with it or you're confused by it, post in the group because there's a bunch of people that have used this frame and they'll tell you exactly what you need to do. Okay. I don't see anything Metabox specific in there that would cause any problems. Does ACSS smart spacing apply to shortcode generated elements? No. But you can just use the smart spacing utility class. Now, the question is I don't know what's being rendered by the shortcode. Like a shortcode could render an absolute disaster scenario of divception, and then smart spacing may have trouble doing what it's supposed to do because of all the nastiness going on inside whatever the shortcode is rendering. So I would say give it a shot. Use the smart spacing utility. If it looks wonky, then report it to us and we'll see if it's a fixable situation or addressable, or if it's not. It really is going to depend on what's being rendered by the shortcode. Data marker inset top MB locations top position. Yeah, so if you're not using MetaBox, you're going to have an ACF custom field for your top position, and you just switch the dynamic data to that, and it's done. Okay, auto BIM logic confusion. Hey, you're not alone. You're not alone. Add header Bravo, click BIM on header Bravo main. You'll see enter and logo auto selected, but not nav or button Y. Okay. All right, I'm happy to do that. We'll take a look at it. Okay, you said header Bravo. Okay, header Bravo. Okay, and let's just get a menu in here. Okay, refresh. I guess I don't have a menu. I don't have a menu set up on the site to use, but I guess that's not super important. So on main, you're saying enter, header Bravo, enter, header Bravo, enter, okay, header Bravo logo, nav menu this is a different block element, okay? So we're just doing a little inspection of what's actually in here. This is a separate block element, so it should not be handled. Button this is not really a child of the header, right? It's just a button with button primary, and it's hidden at the S breakpoint, okay? So the inner should be handled by auto BIM. The logo should be handled by auto BIM, and that's it, right? So if I hit auto BIM here, header Bravo. So let's just say my header. And so I'm gonna do create new and delete old, and it's handling inner and it's handling logo, and it's excluding the button and it's excluding nav menu alpha because these are block elements in themselves. These are not element children. So from what I'm seeing in this case, we apply classes, auto BIM is doing its job. Now that's my header logo, that's my header inner, and that's my header right there. And then these were left alone because they're separate block level elements. They live within header Bravo, but they actually live within a bunch of headers. They live, because a button can live anywhere that it wants, and a nav menu can live anywhere it wants, right? They're not tied to that specific header. So they get handled as separate block elements, which is correct in BIM. So if there's still any confusion on that, let me know. And in this regard, you don't even need BIM, really. And for most websites, because of the fact that we're working in a template. So this header template controls every page of your website for the most part. Like on most websites, you have one header, right? So what do you need BIM for? There's not gonna be 18 instances of the header that need global control. The global control is provided to you by the fact that it's in a template right now. So you could use pure utility classes here and be fine. You could use ID styling here and be fine. We give you BIM because it's just, our process is we BIM everything, and when in doubt, BIM it out. But the BIM in a header template is not all that useful. So it's really not even you don't really even have to fool with this. Let's see. Where can we get ACSS tokens and frames for Figma? That's coming back very, very soon. I had a discussion, I'll just tell everybody because you may not have seen the post in the community, but I talked to Tommy about it, and Tommy's position right now, he's working on what he calls internal documentation. So this is documentation that actually lives within the product as you're using it. And he feels that because of the nature of tokens, the complexity, the amount of questions that people have, right? We've done tutorial videos, all that, it's all good. But he really feels like in order for people to have the best possible experience and the easiest possible experience, he wants to complete this internal documentation before we re-release the product. So in terms of us, kudos to, like, I get it sucks to wait longer, right? And most products, I guess, out there, or a lot of them, would just be like, nah, I mean, we care more about money. Let's just release it ASAP and get as many people to buy it as possible, and we'll sort out the rest later. So kudos to Tommy, right? Being like, no, we're not gonna do that. We're gonna make sure that when people do buy it, they have the best possible experience with it. And so we're gonna finish this part and then we'll release it. And yeah, they gotta wait a little bit longer, but we wanna protect the experience over getting the money now. That's where Frames for Figma and ACSS tokens is currently at. It's almost wrapped up, it's almost done, but that's the explanation if you want full transparency. Can I make an image have a clickable parent? I tried on logo Charlie and put the link on the image. I pasted code from your doc to no avail. Can I make an image have a clickable parent? An image have a clickable parent. I tried on logo Charlie. Okay. Yeah, I was thinking in my mind, like there's very limited scenarios where you would want to do that. Logo Charlie may be one of those scenarios. So let's take a look. I don't want logo Charlie. I want its whole section. Okay, here's logo section Charlie. All right. Yeah, let's get rid of that. Okay. So you want these logos to be clickable, right? Well, here's the thing. Okay, so I'm glad we brought this up because making the image clickable parent is not what you want to do in this situation. So if we inspect this, we have an image and we have the label of the brand name. The label of the brand name is what you would want to turn into the link and then make that clickable parent, right? So let's try that. You wouldn't want to do it on the image. Now, to answer the question about the image, on these images, you can do it because they're wrapped in a figure tag. If your image is not wrapped in a figure tag, you will not be able to use clickable parent on the image. Not that you would want to, because I'll explain more in a minute with accessibility and things like that. But images don't support pseudo elements, and clickable parent uses pseudo elements to accomplish its mission. So they will not work on images by default. Now, if you add a figure tag, that gives you a wrapper that does support pseudo elements, and now clickable parent will work. But by default, it will not work on images. But that's neither here nor there because you shouldn't be linking the image in the first place. You would want to link the brand name and then extend that to the entire card. So we'll do that right now. So we'll say link to, we'll say getframes.io as an example. Okay, and now let's just look at what's going on the front end. By the way, I would loop this, okay? So you want all your brands in a custom post type. You don't want to be in this manual brand logo situation that most people are in. You want to put all your brands in a custom post type and have a logo field, or that's a featured image really, and then the name of the brand, and then loop these, right? Okay, so because you notice right now I did one of them and now all the others are just waiting on me like, oh, what about me, dog? You gonna get to me? And that's a lot of logos right there that you're gonna have to manually manage. No, you don't want to live that life. So make a custom post type and then query these. All right, so now what we do, because clickable parent, we're gonna go to logo Charlie right here, the wrapper. We know this uses, if you read the documentation, you know this has to be set to position relative, okay? And now we go here and we say clickable parent. All right, we add that, we hit save. And now the entire thing is clickable. See that? Okay, outside of it, not clickable. Inside of it, clickable. Now, when you focus, oh gosh, that's ugly. It's just gonna focus on the link. So now we come in and we say, well, you know what? I'd like to focus the parent as well. And we hit save there and we refresh. Oh, that's much cleaner, isn't it? That's much nicer. I mean, do you know how to do that off the top of your head? Most people don't. But with ACSS, I mean, you just add a little utility and it's like, oh, that's done for me. Okay, that's cool. So that's exactly how you would go about doing that. Now, of course, it's going to inherit your link color, right? So you go to the label, and this is why you're using BIM, because this is going to apply to all of these. And you would say, well, I don't want it to be my link color. I just want it to be like my base ultra dark color. Okay, now it's going to be your base ultra dark color. It's going to still have the hover, so you're going to want to adjust that. The other thing I would say, because the whole wrapper is clickable, you want to come in and do some sort of like, what happens on hover to this thing. And this is actually a little bit of the next phase of ACSS is if I want some simple, just like hover effects, right? So I want that card to lift up a little bit when somebody hovers over it to signify that it's a clickable, the whole thing is clickable. I want people to be able to add that with a simple utility, right? Right now, you can't do that. That's the next, we're moving into that phase next. But it's difficult because I got to think, all right, what are people going to want to do? I mean, there's simple translates, maybe some simple scales that we could do, and then transitions come into play at that point. So how are we going to manage that? What are we going to call them? There's a little bit to figure out there, but that is coming I would say very soon, very soon. Okay, let's see. On the current top, why don't we make the image clickable, right? Because the image has no context. Screen readers can't really read the images very well. I mean, you can put the alt tag in there, which is fine, but the best practice is to have a physical text label, make that the link. Now it's obvious when somebody on a screen reader selects it, it's gonna say Google, right? Go Google or Frames or whatever. And then this is all in a list, and so that's given extra context to what's going on. But the image is, you want to avoid that. All right, let's go. Question, 2 comments. Bricks has the disable element spacing, ACSS option under spacing, automatic spacing tooltip reads automatically spaced content in containers using. Why do we need the variable? Doesn't this happen automatically? Are we expected to add content gap in every section container? I don't know if you were here when we covered this. We covered it at the beginning, but I showed you the automatic spacing. Option under spacing, automatic content spacing. Tooltip reads automatically spaced content in containers using. All right, well, let's just go there. So ACSS option under spacing, automatic content spacing. This is where we were earlier. It's not, you mean contextual spacing? Yeah, this is the safest way to do it. The way that Bricks does it is a little bit more heavy-handed and it can cause some conflicts with other things that you're trying to do. This uses less specific instructions that make it easier to override and change things in the future should you need to. So I would do it with ACSS because it's safer. Okay. How could we style tooltips with ACSS? We're going to give you a tooltip component in Frames. That's really the best way to do it. But other than that, you can target what the tooltip is doing and then use variables for what you want to change. That's the best way to do it right now. Did we have any luck finding out the Frames modal can slide in, out instead of fade? Yeah, it can. It can. It takes custom CSS for sure, but it can. What we're going to do in the next evolution of the modal is the modal is actually going to be and I got to talk to Waji and Nuno about this, but it's going to be kind of a 2-in-1. You know, like the slider is a 2-in-1, like it can be a carousel or it can be a slider, right? The modal can be a modal or an off canvas. And so we can have defaults for like, make it behave like an off canvas out of the box or make it behave like a modal out of the box. It can kind of be a 2-in-1 component, I think. And so that's the next evolution of that component. All right, best way, but right now, if you know what you're doing, you can make the modal look like an off-canvas element. You just got to know what you're doing. This is like custom CSS and stuff like that, but it is possible, right? But I want it to be out of the box. I want it to be out of the box. So that's the next evolution. Best way to set highlights, accents in headers. One word is in a different color. Best way to set accents, okay. Well, anytime you want to set one word to be a different color, like the word brands right here, right? So all you have to do, okay, my keyboard works. We'll come in here and we'll just do a span. And then, so you wrap it in a span like this, and then you can do whatever you want to it. So question is, do you want to use a class? Like I could say class equals highlight, okay? So notice that that does absolutely nothing. But if I go inspect this and we look here, oh, look, that word is wrapped in a span with a class of highlight. So now what I can do, and again, this is another thing I think in page builders that, I don't know. It needs a little bit more distinction, but I can just create a class here called highlight, which is gonna, this is why it's confusing. It's gonna force me to add that class to this whole container, which I don't really want it, I don't want that to be the case. But then I can go to style, typography, color, and I can do something like action medium or something like that, which see, that's annoying. It's done it to all of it. But now if I just take off the class from that container, it's left on my span, right? So I gotta kind of like put it in a place I don't want it to be until I can finish styling it. Then I just remove it from that place. But that's what I would recommend you do. Now what's going on between the front end and the back end? Let's close all these windows. Okay, now let's go to here, okay? And now we gotta see why Bricks did not style that. So now we're gonna come down, span highlight, brands. Now it's gonna depend on how Bricks wrote the CSS for that. And it's because it's an H2, okay? Now, and we have no control over specificity in the builder, right? That's why we're gonna run into other issues here. So now what we have to do is bring our highlight class back. See, there's no way for me to edit the highlight class without applying it to something. And then, see, that's what I was just about to say. Like, page builders need to do a much better job of how they're handling this. So H2 class highlight needs to also do a color action. Let's see if that fixes our situation, okay? It's interesting that it's inheriting it too. Why is it not on here anymore? Didn't I just apply that? And why is my text wrong? Span, span, span. All right, let's start from scratch. Okay. Why? Why would that be happening? Okay, let's go here. Yeah, where Bricks? What are you doing to me? I don't see highlight anywhere. Oh, there it is, right there. On the section. I got put on the section. See, that's the problem with, like, I have to apply it somewhere I don't want to apply it in order to style it, and like, wow, what a hassle. Okay, let's put our span back, and let's see if we've gotten to where we want to go. Span class equals highlight here, and put the span on there. Save. It's working in the builder. Still not working on the front end. This is a specificity issue. Oh, it's because the span is in. It's in, not on. Okay, let's put the highlight back. Let's come down here. What we want to do is H2, no, root, highlight. Let me look at this again. The span is in the H2, so we need an H2. Span class equals root. Man, had to work that out in my brain for a second. Okay, I think that's what we want. Okay, now we can remove, and hopefully we're where we need to go. Fuck, we're not. Okay. Span class, highlight, brands. It actually shouldn't matter that it's, I don't know why it's inheriting. I don't even know that color. I don't even see it. All right, we'll have to revisit that. I'm not gonna spend too much time on it right now. Let's do this on not a heading. So I think we're just running into a heading specificity issue. Let's do it on this lorem stuff down here. Span class equals highlight. Okay, lorem, Let's cut off the span right there. Still not. But you notice it's working in the builder. And that tells you, when there's zero caching, this is a local install. It's telling you that there's a specificity issue. And it is adding the highlight, but it's not pulling. Okay, let's do this then. Let's just go around Bricks. Let's see if this is a Bricks issue or something else going on. So let's go new snippet. Let's just say global. And this is gonna be a SAS style sheet. And we'll save, and we'll go here. Highlight, color, var, action. Bang, sandbox, refresh. What is Bricks doing that WP Codebox is easily able? Now, can I do it on the heading? Span class equals highlight. Because everything in my brain was like, no, that should be working. And it does when you do it here. So what is Bricks doing wrong? Highlight, typography. It's there. It's there. Huh. I'm gonna have to investigate that. It's clearly something going awry in bricks, because when I do it, and this is all that should have been needed, right? Which I did in bricks. And it's working when I do it in WP Codebox, not working when I do it in bricks. Can't explain it right now, but I can investigate it further. Maybe there's a little buggy, something going on. I don't know. All right, where is my chat window? All right, there we go. All right, let's go in and get to the next one as quickly as we can. You showed how to change the color of the marker easily, but is there a quick way to change the marker type? Say a circle to a square. That's coming in the next iteration of those utilities. I don't think we went that far. I have trouble remembering because I did start to do it, and then I think we pulled back on it is what happened. But yeah, we will do marker types, and there's actually some custom markers that you can do as well. We were gonna load up like a little library of, you can actually use HTML entities for this, but like a dozen or so little, like you could do a heart, you could do a check, you could do like, you know, the standard stuff that people might want. And so it'll be like marker check, and it makes them all check marks. Marker heart, and it makes them all hearts. Like, it'd be a little like pre-done little library for being able to do that. For the link underline, I noticed that it's turned on. It adds an underline to the navigation links. Is there a way to tell it not to affect certain links? Yes, you can. We're still refining that a little bit because it introduces greater specificity, which can cause some other like weird issues. But yes, if you go to buttons and links, and then you say link decoration underline, you can then turn this on, add default link exclusions, and you can say like header, see it tells you right there, like here's an example, header A. So you can say header A, and then it's gonna exclude all of your header links from getting those decorations. So it does increase specificity right now. I'm trying to find a way to do it where it doesn't increase specificity, but that's neither here nor there. All right, next question. Will ACSS 3 allow us to change the border for outline buttons to be different than the filled ACSS button? I think you can already do that. See this outline border color? Oh, okay, so on hover, well, that's just pulling, if you think about how an outline button works, it's gonna pull from the border color for the action button right here. I don't know why you would want a filled action color that has a different border than the outline action button. I think that's why our logic was like, that would never happen. So can you show me a use case where your outline button needs a different color than the solid version of that same button? I think you're gonna run into inconsistency issues if you're trying to do that. Okay. Is there a way to style all buttons to have a certain shape and still use ACSS button classes, e.g. a button with a cutoff corner? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you can pretty much do whatever you want with buttons. So think of the normal button as like a starting point, you know? And this is all, you know, easily globally controllable, right? Now, see this class is locked? Well, just because it's locked by default don't mean you can't unlock it, right? You just give a little unlock. I mean, you can come in here, you can do whatever you want, right? 50 VW, and I'll do import. Actually, let's think about this for a second. The better way to do this, actually, because we just changed this. We just had an update where we made these buttons way more flexible. And this would actually be a good use case for doing this. If you come in here, you're gonna notice that every declaration for the styling on here is a variable, right? And so if you come down here and look at border radius, so button border radius, right? So you could come in here to button action and go to CSS, and you can target that variable, button border radius, and then look at that. See, I just did that. Now you can, if you know border radius, there's even like multi-level border radiuses that you could do. But let's say I did 0, 0, 0. Now that's ugly as hell, but it shows you how you can customize this button action class to do whatever you want it to do, and all you're doing is manipulating the actual variable. And if you go to Automatic CSS, this also, by the way, gives you, let me show you in just a second, but if you go to Docs and you go to button variables, I think, or just search for buttons, right? It's gonna come up. And then you go down and look, it tells you every name of every variable, right? So anything you wanna adjust, here's all of the names available to you right now, or you could just inspect the button and look at what you wanna change. But this also gives you the ability to change the style of the action button section by section or page by page. You can actually create different themes, and the name of a theme, because you could come up here to page settings, general, body classes, and you could say like carnival theme, right? So like that. And then in CodeBox, under carnival theme, you can change the values of these buttons, and it's only gonna change that button style on the carnival theme pages, right? So there's an infinite amount of flexibility now, and it's all provided through those locally scoped variables right here for pretty much every button property. You can change one-off buttons at the ID level by changing these variables. Like, you just have tremendous power now using those variables. So instead of trying to override actual like instructions, like going to border radius and trying to do it here, don't even worry about all that. Just use the variable, come into CSS, and actually you could put everything in one place. You could even copy all of this right here and just paste it in that root right there. Where was I? Right here. Just paste all those and then change the ones you want to change. Get rid of the ones you don't use, like whatever you want to do. Okay, got to keep moving, got to keep moving. Is there a fix incoming for the line lengths being overwritten by the class Brixie selector? We can't fix that. We've already put in multiple tickets. Brix has to fix that. We're waiting on that to happen. As last I heard, they didn't want to fix it, so we're just at a crossroads. Like, there's nothing we can do about it. What would be the best way to set up the color primary action when the client have only two colors? Example, blue and black. Sometimes I get confused what to choose. So I've put a lot of thought into this lately. I've thought about abstracting this even more. Think about contextual spacing. I actually need to write an article on this and probably do like a poll in the group. But you know, we had space M, space S, space L, space XL. We were using those everywhere. And then I, came up with the idea that, like, I'm fairly certain I was the first one to come up with the concept of contextual spacing variables. And I did it because I was like, well, we don't have any context for where these tokens are being used, and it would be nice if we had context for them. So we created an abstraction layer called contextual variables, container, grid. We did all this at the beginning, okay? I think there's a case for doing the same thing with colors. Now, what do those contextual variables use? The same tokens that already existed for spacing, right? So think of the base as like, we have these color tokens, but then we have a contextual layer called like BG or whatever names we come up with, or text, or like text light, text dark, whatever. And these reference other color variables, but they give you context as to where they're being used. And it could be like heading color, text color, whatever, right? But they all map to the existing color variables, but they give you extra context in how those are being used. Because here's the challenge. I've been thinking about this. And these are just my unfiltered, unedited thoughts on a live stream. But you guys can tell me what you think. And unfortunately, I can't see the bottom of the chat because I don't want to lose my space in where we're asking questions, but it is what it is. So if I have a brand that has one color and then like a base, right? Let's say the base is like charcoal or something. And then the action color is this like blue color right here, okay? Well, immediately I would come in and be like, well, I can turn off primary, I can turn off secondary, I can turn off accent, I'm gonna keep base. And if I'm not gonna use neutral, I could turn that off if I wanted to, but I'll probably just keep it on for insurance purposes. Okay, and I hit save. And then I start building my entire site. And for my background colors and things like that, what am I using? Well, primarily I'm using the base, right? And if I need a light section, it's just base ultra light or base light, base medium. I got dark for dark, base ultra dark, whatever, and I'm good to go. The problem is, and then let's say I use action for everything else. But here's the thing. Let's say there's buttons and links that are blue, but there's also this situation where we have some highlights here, like some accents. But the designer decided that the accent colors would be the same as the action colors. Okay. This is complicated by the fact that the word action is already somewhat of a contextual color, right? Because you're supposed to use it on buttons and links, the action items on the website. Does it make sense for me to use action the way that I actually did right here when we did it? Look at this. So if you go into Codebox, global, see, I used color action on highlight. But guys, the highlight is not an action element. It's not a link. It's not a button. So I'm kind of, that's like I would argue, like almost an improper use of that token. Because if we ever rebrand, go back to this concept that I refer to all the time as like, none of us have a crystal ball. We don't know what's going to happen to this website in the future. A designer could, we know rebranding is a thing. So the next designer comes along and they're like, well, this brand is now going to have 3 colors. And so now we're in a situation where we've used this action color in places that it probably should not have been used, which means we can't easily retheme this website. What we should have done, and this seems like it doesn't make sense, but to me it actually makes perfect sense. We have something called an accent color, which is also, guys, kind of already a contextual color. Okay, it's used for accent items. What most people think doesn't make sense is they go down here and they use the same color for accent as they did for action. I actually think this makes perfect sense because it allows me to do this. It allows me to go in to WP Codebox where we were doing that highlight and say accent. It's going to render the same color, but I've protected the contextual nature of my colors. So when we rebrand and accents actually need to be different than action, I won't have to fix anything. I just set a different accent color and everything works the way that it's supposed to, right? Do you guys see how this needs deeper thought, right? Now, the thing that's not contextual, here's the problem. So we go into Automatic.css, we go into palette. And guys, this is what literally this shit keeps me up at night, okay? There's like an underlying fucking university level philosophy to CSS and web design that most people don't like get into, but I get into that shit. Okay. This is stuff I think about all the time. This is why ACSS does things that other frameworks don't do. Accent is contextual already. Action is contextual already. Primary is not contextual. Secondary is not contextual. Those can be used however you want to use them, which is a problem. I'm not going to say that's not a problem. There is a problem there. And base is not really contextual. Neutral is not contextual. So to me, this is what I've been thinking about is we need another abstraction layer for like where these colors are being used or how they're being used so that when we get into a situation, which we know is highly likely to happen, where colors change in the future or colors are added or subtracted or whatever, we don't have a lot of cleanup work to do. We can just literally change the colors, just like we can do with spacing. When the designer comes along and they're like, hey, all of that content spacing needs to get tightened up. Okay, I can tighten it all up right here. Or, heading, spacing, or whatever it may be. We have control of all of that in ACSS. The color situation lacks context right now. In some ways, action is context, accent is context, that's great, but primary, secondary, base, there's no neutral, there's no context for where those are being used, and that is a bit of a problem. We need to come up with a solution for that. So that's, it's something that keeps me up at night. And I'm open to suggestions if you have suggestions. Okay. Hopefully I answered that question. Primary accent, we'll revisit it one more time. Primary set up the color when the client has only 2 colors. Okay, so yeah, this is basically what I would do. If you have accents that are gonna use the same color, I would turn on accent, put the same color in there, and then use the proper tokens and utilities for those things, and that protects you in the future. That's it. That's what I would do. Even though it seems like that wouldn't make much sense. To me, it makes perfect sense. All right, let's see. Keith says he's facing the double button styling issue in Gutenberg. It's fixed in 2.8, Keith. So my apologies. Yeah, Gutenberg is an absolute trash can still, constantly. So there's all issues like that have to constantly be looked at and fixed. It's fun. It's fun. It's real fun. I love my life. Whenever I'm doing ACSS for Gutenberg, I really love my life. It doesn't get any better. When I have a card with a link and I do clickable parent, how can I take care of the focus on the parent and not on the link? We already did that, Manny. You should have seen it just a minute ago. If you weren't here, let me know and I can maybe show again. I switched to bricks and ACSS just a few days ago. Something covering up the comment. I would like you to make a dummy site built using both your style. I don't know what you mean. I've done full site builds already. I did a Zendesk.com homepage rebuild with ACSS. I would probably go watch those first. But we are going to be doing more of them. We're going to be doing from scratch in Frames for Figma. I'm going to show you wireframing in Frames for Figma. I'm going to hand it over to Tommy. Tommy's going to show you UI design in Frames for Figma with ACSS tokens. Then he's going to hand it back to me. And then I'm going to build it in bricks with ACSS. And Frames. And then it's just like the whole gamut from like conception to reality. That's going to be a fantastic series, and that's going to be an ongoing series. Now, I was like ambitious, and I was like, we should do that every month. And that's probably not going to happen. I think once a quarter would be great, right? If we could do that 4 times a year from scratch through Figma all the way to bricks, I think that would be fantastic. Let's see, okay. Can you just use SVW instead of VW? Okay, we talked about that a little bit. I do overflow clip on the page. You might want to be careful, like overflow hidden on the whole page. I don't know if overflow clip does the same thing. That disables sticky elements. Then I get like mad tickets, like, why don't my sticky elements work? And I'm like, you did overflow on your whole site. Congratulations. You shut that off all on your own. So be careful with that. Where's it at with regards to container media queries? We have support for container queries. Here's the problem with container queries. It's gonna be really interesting to see how page builders handle this. Container queries are very custom. They rely on you eyeballing the situation. So there's not, from a framework perspective, there's not a lot we can do other than enabling container queries with the utility class, which we already do. So you can use the container. I think, did we do documentation for this yet? Let's go back here and we'll write the word container and see if we did this yet. We kind of added it a little bit on the sly, so I don't know that we've even done documentation for it yet. But it's literally just, you put the word container. That's all you gotta do. You put the word container on it, and it enables container queries. But then you still gotta write a lot of custom CSS because it's based on the situation at hand, which utilities can't have any knowledge of. So yeah. And it's not even using breakpoints because container queries don't use breakpoints. It's all custom. So, and it's going to be really interesting to see how page builders try to approach that. All right, let's go to next question. Okay, I have a full width section split 50-50 with blue and red backgrounds. Within this, I have a block on each side with content. How do I get the content to align with content in standard section? Yeah. I think I know what you're getting at here. So what you've done is you come in, do something like a grid 2, right? And we'll probably duplicate this to demonstrate. So there's text there. Actually need in my container, a block would be nice. There we go. Okay, let's put that in there. Let's put that in there. All right, save. I'm gonna duplicate this now. And you're saying, I believe you went 50-50 width section split width with blue and red backgrounds. So I'm thinking what you're saying is you went something like 100% width, maybe even took all the padding off the sides. And then inside of this block, you probably added a bunch of padding, right? So let's do like XXL or something like that. And then we'll probably need another block over here to create your other side, right? Okay, we probably want to stretch these. All right, that's good. And then we probably want to take away the gap, yeah? Okay, and then over here you're saying this was what, red? So I could do like action maybe. They don't actually have to be red. They just need to be 2 different colors. So let's do something like this, okay? And we need to be able to see our content. So let's do this. Any of these will work, okay? Put it on here as well. All right, doesn't really matter. So there's your like 2 different colors. And then if we refresh, this is what you're saying. This content does not align with this content because the way that you tried to make this split double thing going on here, you had to go full width with it. So now shit's all out of whack, right? I think that's what you're asking, right? So how to handle. There's a couple different ways to handle this. There's some frames that handle this for you. The one thing you can ask yourself is, is the fact that that's out of alignment, does it matter? Not really. I mean, you're gonna see a lot of sites where it goes from full width content to content with content to full width content to content with content. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It just depends on the overall rhythm of the UI and spacing and things like that and the order at which you're trying to accomplish that in. Off the top of my head, it's also harder because in page builder land, because of all these controls on the side, you don't even see how off it is until you view it on the front end. You could do something with pseudo elements. Let's see here. I don't want to spend too much time on it. Take this content. I saw actually somebody doing this in the group earlier. I wonder if it was you asking about this. Yeah, it would be something you have to play around with. I probably would go, well, the other thing you could do, well, I wouldn't do it like this either. I mean, you could do a gradient. Like you could do a hard stop gradient at 50-50 on the section itself, but you do run the risk. Of course, if you use gaps, then the gaps, you're not gonna be able to control that with gap. I'm cycling through a lot of options in my head. There's like major cons to a lot of them. I think pseudo elements is gonna be the way to go, but then there's probably gonna be a little math involved. Maybe I can do that as a tutorial. I'll work it out and then do a tutorial on it. How do you know while doing BIM that something else in the site was named the same? It's pretty simple. So if I want to name this, let's say I name this like, okay, my container, right? And then now fast forward, I'm on a different page and it's 8 hours later or 8 days later or whatever. And I'm adding another thing and I'm like, I want to call that my container. Can I call that my container? Well, you just come up here and type in my container and it's going to show you, oh, that's already been done. So, I mean, you could just use the auto suggest to check. You could use the new Bricks class manager to check. There it is right there. So yeah. Plus it's not going to let you make another copy of it, right? You can't, it's just going to apply it. It's not going to let you make another copy of it. So you're kind of naturally protected in that regard, I would say. All right, let's close that. Let's go. Could you show how to use the breakout classes, please? I'm struggling making certain blocks go full width while others remain contained. I just showed you that a little bit ago. I would rewind and watch the replay. How did you set the background colors? Okay, that's somebody else talking to somebody else. Thanks for the auto BIM explanation to help me understand fully. How does the auto BIM determine what is a block and what isn't? It determines it by the classes that already exist on the item. So in frames land, if we just grab any of these, So let's I guess feature cards of some kind would be the easiest approach. I already customized this in here. Let's not do that one because I effed that one up on purpose in a previous video on this. So let's not do that one. Let's go feature again. Those are complex. Let's do feature section Lima, okay? So if we look at this card right here, feature grid. So obviously feature grid Lima is a block of its own. And this is a block that does not have any element children. There are no elements that are children of this block. There are only other blocks that are children of this block. So that's a block, right? Now if I open this, hey, now we got element children in there. So if I try to auto BIM this, it's going to recognize that, see, it's going into its mode thing of do you want to rename, create new, delete old, what, yada, yada, yada. It's recognized that there are element children. How did it recognize that? Because they all share the same class stem. They all share FR feature card Lima, right? Double underscore. So it knows those are all element children. But if I try to auto BIM the grid, look, no options for rename or delete, copy styles, yada, yada, yada. It's thinking to itself, well, there's no element children, so you might want to rename all these things or add classes. Really, it's add classes to all of these things, which clearly you don't want to do, right? But why is it suggesting you do that? Because it didn't find any element children. Look, detected elements. There are none. So other than these blocks, now you could just give them all a class, but I mean, that wouldn't do you any good, right? That's not BIM. That's not BIM. So come down here, auto BIM this. Now you're in business. Now you're in business. And if you want to delete this one or rename this one, just do it right here, right? Or use the new class manager. That's a new good way to do it too. This is called auto BIM because it's literally just for BIM. It's just for BIM. And in order to do BIM, you have to have a block with element children. And the only thing in this frame that has a block with element children is feature card Lima. That's the only thing that's auto BIMable. Now, here's the thing. We don't know that you're using frames. This is not just built for frames. This is built for any workflow, right? So if I add a div right here, it's supposed to go inside that container. Okay, let's add it in the container. Thank you, Bricks. Okay, so now I'm building a card. Here I am building a card, text, and I got let's put a link in there. Okay, and let's throw an image in there. All right, and then let's wrap the image because you're supposed to wrap every single image. So as I just put on my website, right? Let's go to here. So there's my wrapper for the image. Great. So I've got enough stuff going on in here now. Now, normally you'd have to go item by item by item and oh, okay, give it a class, give it a class, give it a class, give it a class, give it a class. No, that's not what I want to do. I want to go my card, and then I do heading, and then I want this to say like description. And then you should be doing this anyway because good organization is a good practice. We'll call that link, and then this is going to be image wrapper or media wrapper or whatever you want to call it. And this is going to be media. So now you're all nice and organized. And now you go BIM and it's going to go, look at all those element children. Okay. And I can say, yeah, I want to apply classes to those. And now every single one has a class and it's all BIMified and you're good to go. Now, if I auto BIM this, it's going to be like, oh, I still recognize that there's some children in there, right? Do you want to add more classes to those or what do you want to do with them? You have to be careful because you can, with great power comes great responsibility. You don't want to just willy-nilly go auto BIMing everything because it'll let you just continue adding a bunch of classes that you may not need. You got to know when and where to use them. This is a situation. Now when I hit it again on the card, now I could potentially say, you know what? I effed up. I didn't want to name it my card. I wanted to name it your card, okay? And now I just use the rename feature. And so now all of those classes are going to get renamed. And now it's going to also rename my label for me to your card and your card description. So that's how that works. But it's all based on blocks and elements. It can't be a block with no elements. And that's why I said you got to know the difference between a block and an element. And if you know that, you're good to go. If you're confused by that, you're going to be confused by auto BIM. All right, let's keep going. Okay, question. For the brand logo example, would you add an order custom field to the CPT to control the order? What are you trying to order them by? That's the next question. I need a follow-up answer. What are you trying to order them by? Okay, what is BEM? Gutenberg Rob. Welcome Gutenberg Rob. ACSS and Frames question. What I'm trying to ask is, do we need to manually write out the variable content gap, or does the spacing take effect automatically? If you have the automatic spacing switch on, then yes, it will take effect automatically. Okay. Let's go. Make it root and add important. Okay. I think it doesn't like the oh, did I have a period before the root? Could be. Okay. Button variables is genius. No other framework have this. Mind blown. Yeah, there's this thing after thing after thing after thing that's like little details, right? That just don't exist elsewhere and that are so tremendously handy and valuable. Color partials is like another one. Okay, yeah, so FR text light and FR text dark are like contextual uses of color. Yeah, exactly. So I think text dark and text light, we just need to chop off the FR, right? Like we built those for frames and I think we've proven their usefulness. We now need to detach them from frames and make them available just ACSS wide. So a text dark, text light, BG dark, BG light, BG something else. I'll put a thread in the group. Let's have a discussion about this and try to get it ironed out, something that just makes complete sense. And I think that's going to bring a lot of value to what we're all trying to do. Okay. Kevin, I did a site with just bricks and then did it with bricks plus ACSS. And we did a speed test for both sites. The site with ACSS consistently loaded 0.8 to 1 second faster. Any idea why? Exact same site. The one with ACSS loaded faster. I mean, I would actually expect, depending on if you have pro mode on or not, I would think it would load just a slightly bit slower, not like anything meaningful, but you could send me the sites. You could send me the sites. I'll check it out. I'd be interested to find the answer to that as well. Okay. Yeah, you're saying pleasant surprise. Yeah, I'm surprised by that too, honestly. I can't answer the question. I don't know. I mean, that's great that that's happening, but I don't know. I would expect the opposite to happen, honestly. Okay. Yeah, the background gradient hard stop. I kind of excluded that in my mind because the minute you, first of all, when it goes on mobile and those two sections stack, you're going to have to change the direction of the gradient. That's one. Which I don't think you would have to do with maybe another method. So yeah, the challenge is, and here's the challenge with the framework situation and even frames, there's a lot of work that we do that people don't ever see. Why? Because there are multiple paths to getting to the same visual outcome, but each of those paths has different pros and cons. And some cons are really conny and some pros are really pro-y. And you almost have to build it 3 times and be like, okay, here's what I did. Which one wins? And sometimes it's not always immediately obvious. So you have to do a lot of extra work to get, like, if you want to live in philosophy land like I do, of like, what literally is the best way to do this? Then you have to do it every way and then weigh out pros and cons and think of different scenarios and other use cases and then come to a conclusion. It's like a very scientific-y, philosophy kind of approach, right? That most people aren't willing to take the time to do, but I take the time to do it. And that's why I defend things that I say. Like people are like, oh, just do it whatever way you want. Like, no, you can't just do, there's definitely pros and cons to different methods. So I've taken the time to look at the different methods and then make a confident statement. So it's annoying when someone comes along and they're like, just do it whatever you want. Like it's just kind of annoying. But yeah, I think we have to look at pros and cons across both of those. Got the modal sliding out. Thanks for the info. Good. Have the BIM bugs been addressed in ACSS 3 when renaming and removing classes? Often some of the older classes are still left, and even sometimes styles don't copy over. I've yet to see an instance where auto BIM is being used correctly where that happens. I've tried to break it. Trust me, I've tried to break it. I have not been able to break it. The only way that it gets broken is when it's used in the wrong situation, which is very common. And I don't blame people for using it wrong. Like it's BIM itself, it takes a bit to wrap your mind around for some people. It just is what it is. We can either not have the tool or have the tool. We have the tool. You just got to use it in the right situations. But if you're like, no, Kevin, listen, I know for sure this is the right situation I'm using it in and it's still breaking, just send me a video. I didn't build it. I got nothing to defend. Look, we'll throw Christoph under the bus, right? Right? Like, I'm just telling you, I haven't been able to break it. Okay, but if you think you can break it, then send me the video and I will gladly just ship it off to Christoph and be like, dog, they broke it. Like, go fix this. Okay. It ain't my work I'm trying to defend, All right, I looked all over the inner circle for events today. Nothing, just stumbled upon this. It's not an inner circle event. It's an ACSS. It was posted in the ACSS group. Okay, calc. All right, instead of brand logos example, just use staff CPT. How would I order the CEO before Bev in accounting? I did a whole video training on that, actually. It's already on the YouTube channel on geary.co. You do have to be careful with the order property in some of those situations because the tab index order will change. Like the tab index order won't follow the CSS order property. So you can get into a situation where your tab index is bouncing around the grid, and that's not good. So you would actually want to use the loop controls to control that, and I would do something like menu order. So if you look in the loop, let me just go in here, turn the loop on, query, right here, order by, order by. You would go down to menu order and use menu order for that because that will actually order them in the query itself, not with CSS. And this will protect your tab order if your elements are going to be clickable. If elements are not going to be clickable, doesn't really matter. You can do it with CSS. But if elements are going to be clickable, you might want to use menu order instead. And then you got to go manually set. If you don't know what that maps to, it maps to dog shit in WordPress. You click on something like page, and this is in post types too. And then it's like under page attributes order right here. You can get a plugin that allows you to drag and drop order. That's probably what I would do in that situation, but that's the route you would want to go. Okay. What do you think about disabling Gutenberg fully and just going with bricks for pages and CPTs in classic editor mode for posts? No, I think Gutenberg as a blog post editor is superior to the classic editor. That is the one thing it's good at. It's good at doing blog posts. Still has a shitload of bugs and hiccups and annoyances, but it's better than the classic editor. So I would stick with Gutenberg for all of your blog posts, 100%. I'm not a classic editor fan, and I don't use the classic editor ever. And absolutely 100% do not build blog posts in bricks. Build a blog post template in bricks and render Gutenberg content into it. Do not use the builder for individual blog posts. That we will tie you to a post in Town Square, and we will give you lashings for that. It's just a thing that will happen, okay? Can you show us how you would replace the frame CSS class with your own one by copying the style from frames? I usually do copy, style, and paste, but there's a faster way. We're gonna answer this on the frames live stream, but this is the workflow that you should use. Let's go to Sandbox. We got about 8 minutes left, so get in your last final questions here. Hey, here's a new little nice little frame that just got released. okay? We got to come in here. You'll notice this from time to time. It's because when you use default colors for your headings, the frame obviously doesn't know like what your default is. So you just got to come in here and set your heading color. We'll just do white. But the fact that we use classes on everything means it's fixed everywhere all at once, right? Which is great. But this is a nice little, ooh. It even does it on tab navigation. It's pretty slick, pretty sweet. You know what it also does? It's, you know, if I'm like, nah, you know, I want 2 plans. Well, I mean, there's a shitload of math. I mean, you can look under the hood at what's involved here. I mean, this is not light work, you know? This is not light work going on here. But if you notice, I took one away and it still works flawlessly. It's like, oh, we'll just be 2 now. I'm gonna give you a hint. This little outline right here, this little card effect is not even part of the card. It's actually part of the grid. It's just floating back there, going where you want it to go. And it's always the right size because of how we designed it. I designed it. Just go, no. Okay, all right, let's just keep going. 4, you know, it should, if the grid is big enough, we got to change it to a 4 column here. There's some local variables here, right? Where you tell it how many cards are in there. And it supports 2, 3, 4. So that's real nice. But what you're gonna wanna do immediately when you import something like this, if you don't wanna use frames classes, is you identify, now, oh, this is a good one. This is a good one. That's actually there's a good example right here. Remember we talked about, does it have element children or does it have block children? Most of these grids have block children. This one does not have block children. It has, look, this is FR pricing grid mic plan, okay? Why? Well, because these are fake cards. In order to achieve this sliding effect thing right here, you can't use real cards. You have to use fake cards, right? And so these aren't modular. You can't just take one of these cards and use it somewhere else like you can with many other cards and frames. It has to live inside this grid. It has to. It will break if you use it outside of the grid. So we made it an element child. It is a legit element child of this grid. So now in this situation, you can, look at that. You can just, look, oh my God, how long would that take, right? So I just say pricing grid mic. I just say pricing grid. Okay, it's not a mic, it's not a FR, it's just my pricing grid. That's all it is. And then every single one of those are gonna get renamed. Now, I wanna make them unique. So I'm gonna do create new and delete old. And then I am going to apply classes. And then do I wanna sync labels? Yeah, let's sync labels. Let's sync labels. Apply classes, delete classes everywhere. And golly jeepers. It just still works. And let's go down here to plan. Look at that, pricing grid plan. Let's go deep into this sucker. Plan term, pricing grid plan term. It's just flawless. That's why I said I haven't been able to break it yet. That was major. Like, look at, do you know how many things we just deleted and created new and copied styles from the old to the new? Like that. Like David fucking Blaine over here, okay? Yeah, it's just, if you use it in the right situation, it's magic, baby. It's magic. And I haven't been able to break it. But again, if you are able to break it, send me a video and I will look at it. Okay, last questions, final questions. Sorry if I missed the answer a while, I had to walk away, so let me know. Okay, recommend minifying, optimizing the final code for production. Okay, how would you, optimization. So perf matters, 100%, you go perf matters all day. Then you use just at your server level or even I do Cloudflare. Like I do Cloudflare APO. It's like $5 a website or something and it'll cache the shit out of your site. All of that is enough. Like make sure that things are getting gzipped. You know, there's a lot of just good hosting. Okay, there's a lot of just like basics in place. And then use pro mode. If you're not using all the utility classes, absolutely turn on pro mode. Just use variables. That's gonna lighten the framework by a crap ton. Like go in here, automatic CSS. And what I actually do, I mean, because it's hard to be like, let me go to options. So pro mode right here. I activate this on every single website. Then I even go in and I go a little bit further than pro mode goes. If I'm not using breakouts, off. If I'm not using position classes, off. If I'm not using the centering classes, off. Grid, almost always gonna use. That stays on. Gaps, almost always gonna use. Flexbox classes, don't have a lot of use for those a lot of times. If I'm using straight up BIM everywhere, may not have a use for those, off. Width, I like to have. Radius, radius isn't even heavy. The other thing I was gonna do to help everybody out, I'll kind of put the weight of these maybe. So you know, like, all right, it doesn't cost me much to leave it on. I'll just leave it on. Column classes like we saw earlier. Hey, if I'm not gonna use those, off. Display classes, off. Corner ribbons, off. Like, we're barely loading anything at this point. Barely loading anything at this point. So it's gonna be like, you know, there's no effect. Like, if there is an effect, it's like a 0.1, 0.2 kind of thing. But this guy over here, DK, just said his shit got faster with ACSS. So, I mean, there's that too. All right, Michael says, I break auto BIM each and every time. I guarantee you're using it in the wrong situation. But again, send me a video. I've reviewed, by the way, like 10 videos, and every single one of them is trying to use auto BIM or expecting auto BIM to do something auto BIM's not designed to do. Okay. You missed my 3-part question up there. All right, Riaz, where are you at? Let's go up. Okay. I'm not very sure how to ask this. When you BIMified 2 different variations of the same element, say cards, for example, is it good to BIMify each variation to full child level 1, 2? Okay, when we normally do CSS, we always do contextual styles, and based on the context, the element variation, say card, damn, you wrote a whole novel. The element variation, say card dark BG is styled right. That way we reduce the class count significantly. I'm a bit confused as to why we increase class count by BIMifying each variation of the same element. Please enlighten me. I'm trying to think of what you're asking, because that's just how BIM works. If we go to, this doesn't increase really anything. Let's do a simple frame. So we don't have to look at some complex animated sliding pricing grid. Let's do feature. Let's scroll to the bottom. That's where all the basic shit is. Okay. So here's a card. Feature card Foxtrot. And it's got, if we open this up, I think this is what you're asking. I don't know. I look at Media Wrapper. It's got the class on there. The icon's got the class on there. But all these instances have the same classes. But they're not repeatedly loading the CSS over and over and over and over and over again. The style sheet is loaded, right? And then the labels are matched to the style sheet. They all need, if they don't have the labels, they're not going to get the styles. So they have to have the labels, but we're not repeating the instructions in the style sheet over and over and over again. You are repeating, by the way, it's a good point to make. You are repeating the styles over and over again in the style sheet if you style everything at the ID level. You use classes, there's one source instruction for the class applied to many things without the styles repeating. So I'm a little confused at the question itself. If you want to clarify it, I will tackle it again. But everything's got to have the label in order to get the styling. Okay, let me go back down. At what point does the browser start to slow when declarations are using variables which reference variables? I don't know that anybody's done a test on it. I mean, there's definitely a performance. The more complex a selector gets, right? Let's say you're using like this class and then this class and then this class and then a caret and then a universal selector and then I want the LI inside of that. Like that's a very complex selector. That obviously requires a lot more processing power for the browser. But variables, not so much. I mean, even if variables reference other variables, that should be fairly easy for the browser to parse. So I would think it's undetectable. A lot of stuff with CSS that people complain about is more or less undetectable. In fact, Kevin Powell did a whole video because a shitload of people complain about using the universal selector. And Kevin Powell did a whole like breakdown of test after test after test. And he's like, this is not a problem. Like browsers can easily handle the universal selector. So yeah, most people that think it's a problem, it's not really a problem. I think what Riaz is saying, for cards, I often have a base card with base styling, border radius, padding, BG color, and then I would add feature card or blog card on top of that. Well, in that way, you are duplicating a lot of styling. There's going to be duplication in both regards, right? But you're overriding one set of styling to apply a new set of styling in those cases. And then, you know, it's hard to think of all the cons off the top of my head, but BIM exists for a reason. And BIM has been around for a very, very, very long time. Oh, also you're adding specificity because you have to style a card that has this other class on it, right? Or this class and then child elements based on that class, which increases the specificity. BIM is fantastic because it creates a very flat CSS structure. Like BIM's one of the flattest structures I think that's out there. So in terms of efficiency, like it doesn't really get more efficient than BIM. Yeah, I think you're gonna run into, yeah, you're gonna have to do, you have to do that with modifiers too. Like if I do feature card FR, feature card Foxtrot, -- dark. Like I want a dark version of feature card Foxtrot. Then I'm going to come in and I'm going to do different style instructions. And those style instructions might have to override something that the main class was using. And then in order to target my headings, I got to do root and then feature card Foxtrot heading or whatever, because I don't want to just target an H2 because that might change. It's got to be the class again. So FR feature card Foxtrot. Then it would be heading, right? Something like that. So now this right here is just increased specificity and made a more complex selector and, right? There are, like I said, there's more ways than one to skin the cat, but every other path is going to have its own pros and cons. And these all have to be weighed out. And there's a reason why BIM has consistently won, you know, since like, what, 2004, whenever it was introduced? I don't know. Like BIM is not a new concept. It is a concept that has proven the test of time. But I understand the, you know, whole like, all right, we're gonna have global card styles and then we'll change them as we see fit. I'm not saying that's a bad approach. It's just not BIM, right? So you're gonna have to tackle whatever other pros and cons come with that approach. But the thing that I will say is, at least you're using classes and you have global maintainability over all of this stuff. Like that's the principle. If somebody says, Kevin, I don't prefer BIM, I prefer to do it this other way. And I say, okay, are there any, you know, issues with maintainability that way? Not that I've found. Okay, then we're on the same team. I'm on team maintainability. We don't all have to be on team BIM. I'm on team BIM. But really, we're on team maintainability. And so if you're on maintainability and I'm on maintainability, we're good to go. Now, if you say, oh, I do it this other way, and I go, but doesn't that harm maintainability? And you're like, F you, Kevin. You don't even know. You don't have an argument. Then I'm like, all right, well, we can dismiss that person, right? But if you're like, dog, I've checked it out. It all checks out. Yeah, it's all good. Then I'm like, all right, we're all good then. We're all good. Just like I say, don't litter utility classes everywhere. Well, guess what? When components are introduced, we can go back to using utility classes for a lot of things. For anything that's going to be a component, we could probably use utility classes for that whole thing. So I was not on team utility class everywhere until the situation changed. Now components bring back the functionality of utility classes. Guess what? Why can we do that? Because we're on team maintainability, not team BIM or team custom class or team component or team this, or we're just on team maintainability. That's what we're on. And if you can arrive at maintainability using a different method, that's all fine and dandy. Good to go. All right. One more question. That's it. Then we're out of here. I'm having some issues with Gutenberg content just looking like shit. Heading and text looks fine, but buttons and other stuff and spacing just looks really effed up. What would you recommend? Here's the first question. What are you using in conjunction with Gutenberg? Is it Generate? Is it Quickly? Because in Generate and Quickly, you should get very consistent results. Now, native Gutenberg blocks, I'll just tell you right now, are a shit show. And we have more work to do to make ACSS compatible with them. But it's annoying. And I haven't even I don't even know that those things aren't going to change a little bit in the future. And then everything's going to break again. And it's just a hassle. Things are not done the way they should be done in Gutenberg. And so we have to put a bunch of overrides in place and then just hope that they continue to do it that way going forward to the end of time. Because if they change it, it's going to break it again. I much prefer, I'll tell you right now, Quickly and bricks. So when we integrate with builders, as you know, we have something called true builder integration, right? Where we look at every core element of that builder and how they output stuff, and then we try to make the framework adapt to that. Quickly and bricks have needed the least amount of overrides. Quickly being by far, it needed the least of all of them. And so that shows you that those builders do things correctly out of the box. When a builder doesn't do stuff out of the box, it's a major headaches and a lot of work for us. And, we prefer, that's why I talk so much about this. I would prefer that the builders just do things the right way. And that way, when we come to integrate, we don't have to do a lot of cleanup work or getting around these hurdles and challenges that they put in our way. So yeah, Gutenberg is the worst by far. Gutenberg by far is the worst. The only thing that could probably be worse than that is Element or Divi or something like that. Those would be, we cannot integrate with them. They would be Kevin would not exist. Okay, I would jump off a bridge, a very high bridge, and then nobody would have ACSS anymore. You know that question, what if Kevin gets hit by a bus? Well, I do have a team, okay? And that team would probably take over and everything would keep going very smoothly, right? They all know the drill. They know what they're supposed to do. But if you said, we need you to integrate with Element or in Divi, I would be the first one to jump off the bridge. And then guess what? My team, if they tried to follow, they would all jump, we would all be gone. And then nobody would have ACSS anymore. So we just can't. It's not physically possible to integrate with something like Element or Divi. And Gutenberg is damn near there. I've coded on the edge of the bridge before, just feet dangling off the side, thinking about it, might do it. Gutenberg is awful. It's atrocious. Under the hood, nightmare, absolute nightmare. Okay, that's enough ranting about Gutenberg. All right, when I load in Woo specific frame that includes a button I don't know about Woo specific frames. These are now, you're gonna have to submit a ticket over here to Toby. Get Toby on the line, right? He handles all the Woo stuff. I'm allergic to Woo. I get hives when somebody mentions Woo. I get rashes. It's not a good situation. Are you gonna integrate with SureCart? Yes. I'm waiting on a couple of things to happen and then yes, the answer is yes. I wanna see what John had to say here. I flip-flop between the two approaches. I've also made contextual variables so that I can maintain border radius across all cards. I think you were talking about the BIM versus the other approach. Okay, all right, we gotta call it. I got work to do. Thank you guys for being here. I don't know, I hope this was helpful. This always goes into a half rant, half philosophy, university level CSS discussion. But that's good, it's really good. It's really good to be thinking about this stuff and debating this stuff. But yes, I will be back. We'll do this again next month. Next week, we do the frames version. So if you want the frames specific live stream with all frames related questions, that's next week. So keep an eye out for that. ACSS YouTube channel, make sure you're subscribed. ACSS community, make sure you're active in there. 3.0 is right around the corner. Etch is coming right after that. I've got some announcements in the works that people are going to be like, whoa, didn't see that coming. That came out, I couldn't have predicted that in 2024. Some of that is coming, okay? So just buckle up, buckle up. Things are gonna move fast. There's gonna be a lot of stuff going on. It's gonna be exciting, okay? Love you guys. I'll be back. Peace.